This is a follow-up video to one we produced back on the 31st of January, and if you're interested in watching it, I'll put a link to it at the end. As far as we know, Canada Bay Council has got no video of people using the cycleway, so we have no idea whether they know what it's like from the perspective of a cyclist. So we're going to publish that video here today. But before we get to it, let's have a look at a number of council documents that relate to this project. Perhaps the most obvious place to start is with the environmental strategy, and I'm going to skip to section 3.2 on the resilient city and read out what Council has to say here. Council is committed to tackling climate change within our city and recently declared a climate emergency through a council resolution. Council has been taking climate action for a number of years now. We have an adopted emissions plan which addresses climate mitigation and a climate adaptation plan which focuses on reducing vulnerabilities to climate risks. So those are the words of Council, not mine. Clearly, they are deep believers in climate change and in the need to take action. Okay, well, let's go and have a look at section 2.1. What has the community told us? And the community told us all sorts of things like they want more green space and a clean green environment and all that kind of stuff. Oh, integrate healthy, sustainable environments that support active living, like bike cycling places and walking and stuff like that. Nowhere in this document does it say the community said, we want more on-street parking. It's not mentioned here anywhere. There's nothing in the environmental strategy about providing more car parking or increasing car usage. I think we should bear that in mind when it comes to this trade-off between what's happening here. Council wants to rip up the bike lane to reinstate on-street bike parking. Not bike parking, car parking. In section 3.2b, Transport, Council has very clearly said what their targets are. They want to have 5% of trips made by cycling by 2036. That's up from 1% in 2016. And they want a 30% increase in total kilometres cycleways from the 2019 baseline by 2030. Okay, how is Council going to reach these targets by tearing up this section of cycleway? I guess they're not, are they? So tearing it up flies in the face of these targets. Where's the reconciliation between what the targets and goals that Council has set down in its environmental strategy and what it's trying to do here? Have anyone on Council, any staff, any councillors, the Mayor, considered the impact of this action across all the different plans and strategies that Council has? The last section I'm going to look at is how are we going to get there? Well, they've listed a whole pile of things here, like implementing the local movement strategy, which I'm not going to cover here, otherwise this video will go for too long. Implement the Canada Bay bike plan and the new bike plan. Yeah, okay. Well, tearing up this cycleway kind of flies in the face of implementing those plans, doesn't it? I mean, you're not implementing the plan, you are taking chunks out of the plan or reversing it. Delivering the east-west cycling route, well, that's what this is, and they're going to be tearing a chunk of it up. So we're not going to get there, are we, if we tear this up? Also, our partners down the bottom here, Transport New South Wales and Baybug. Well, the first Baybug heard about this. Well, Baybug didn't hear about this because they didn't bother informing their so-called partners that they were planning on doing this. It's only because some of us subscribed to the Collaborate website that we got notified that this was going to happen and a public meeting was going to be held a couple of days later. As far as Transport New South Wales goes, the functions, I guess, that used to be covered by Transport New South Wales here have been taken over by the Department of Active Transport, and the Minister there is Rob Stokes. Now, I contacted the office of Rob Stokes, the ministerial office, and asked if the Minister or the Department had any idea that this was happening, and I got an answer back saying, no, neither the Minister or the Department had any idea this was happening, and they want to meet with Council to discuss what the heck they're doing. So, yeah, our partners, I don't think so. Now, how about a bit of legislation that was passed back in 2013, the Canada Bay Local Environment Plan? Well, section 1.2, D, what does it say here? To promote sustainable transport, reduce car use, and increase use of public transport, walking and cycling. Right, that's been there for 10 years. I guess all the councillors should know about it, all the council managers should know about this. They're governed under this legislation. Here's the aims of the plan under, the relevant Standard Environmental Planning Instrument Act, blah, blah, blah. So how does ripping up a cycleway conform with Section D of the plan, right? How does it fit in here? Does ripping up a cycleway promote sustainable transport? No. Does it reduce car use? Well, not at all, because it's promoting car use by reinstating parking spaces, doesn't it? Will it increase the use of cycling? No, because we're going to go back to an unsafe on-road, cycle route. So, they're just completely contravening the spirit of the legislation which they're supposed to have been following for the last decade. Now, this climate emergency stuff is all through the council's website, and the council proudly says the City of Canada Bay is one of more than 1,000 local government and jurisdictions worldwide to declare a climate emergency. Our community and stakeholders ask council to show leadership in emissions reduction and support council's climate emergency declaration. Great. Well, again, how does that align with ripping up a cycleway, which is supposed to promote, green transport, reduce emissions, reduce the usage of cars, be a healthy alternative, all that kind of stuff? I mean, how does it align? Because clearly it doesn't. And to give you an idea of how deeply embedded this thinking is in all the council planning, let's have a look at the renewal of this bridge at a golf course out in Concord. So the replacement concrete bridge will be constructed on the upstream side of the existing bridge. Okay, all good. The bridge will be raised clear of future sea level rise and have no impact upon their 1% annual exceedance probability flood levels. To achieve these design requirements, the bridge will be 1.2 metres higher than the existing bridge. So council is going to a great deal of expense here to raise this bridge because they are absolutely sure that flooding is going to occur here in the future because of climate change. And as a result of the climate emergency, it's worth spending money to raise this bridge. I mean, so you can see every little project has this included in it. Every project is all about, climate emergency stuff, except when it impacts on-street car parking. And in that case, all the green credentials get chucked out the window, and we go back to providing, on-street parking for filthy oil-burning vehicles. So, how does that match up with your climate emergency? I don't get it. Pick one. Climate emergency, on-street parking. You can have one or, just one of them. You can't have both. Yet another document, the local strategic planning statement. And rather than go through this in detail, let me just highlight a couple of pages where they show a very clear alignment between promoting cycling, building cycling ways, and all their objectives. There's heaps of them, and it shows how they're going to achieve them. So again, ripping out the cycleway, in my opinion, conflicts with all these objectives that they've written into the local strategic planning statement. Now, has anyone from council gone through the statement and said, how does this impact on this statement? Oh, it impacts badly. Oh, are we going to do, an impact analysis on this and go back to, the councillors and say, oh, we're actually contravening all our planning by doing this? Is anyone doing that? Is anyone doing that kind of basic due diligence? Or are they just going to ram it through the traffic committee and have it accepted by council without going back and reviewing the plans to see if it conforms with these plans? And some of them, like the environmental legislation, have been around for a decade. So it's not like they're new and councillors don't know about them. One part of the plan I will target, though, is the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. And that is because one thing I've really noticed riding around in WA and on the south coast, where there's some quite nice wide shared paths, is these things are now quite heavily used by people with disabilities. That is, you see people on, elderly people on, there's electric gopher things, you see people in electric wheelchairs, getting around on the shared paths and the cycleways. And why is that? Well, it's because they're wider than a footpath. They're generally smoother. They don't have all the kind of hazards which catch your wheels and things like that. They're separated from the traffic. They're just a better alternative than being on the footpath. So, cycleways are just not there for fit, healthy, active adults. They're there for people that are aged 8 to 80 to ride around or scooter around. But they're also there for people living with disabilities who might be getting around in an electric wheelchair or a manual wheelchair or on a 3-wheel tricycle because they've got balance issues. So again, ripping out the cycleway is going to have a pretty poor impact on people that are living with disabilities. Oh, crikey, I forgot there was a few more pages to cover. So here's another one. Create great streets, places, and buildings for people. People, not cars. People. I'll say that again. Create great streets, places, and buildings for people, not cars. Where does it say in this strategic planning statement, we're going to create great places for cars? Nowhere. Nowhere at all. Okay, now the last 2 pages here just shows how all these plans interface with each other. And again, what I think council has utterly failed to do here is go back through the planning process properly and look at all these plans and all the strategies and all the goals and see what tearing out the cycleway would do. How does it impact on those goals? Because clearly it impacts very badly on all of them. And in all these council documents I've read, it doesn't matter which one, I've never seen a goal which says increase on-street parking. Now, if anyone from council can show me a document which says that somewhere in some strategy there is a goal to increase on-street parking, because I've seen nothing about it in the half-yearly reports and things like that. It's just, it doesn't exist. It is not a goal. So when council comes along and says, oh, we have to rip out the cycleway to bring back parking space, it's like, great, show us the goal which says we need to bring back, or we need to increase on-street parking, because it doesn't exist, does it? So, obviously it's a knee-jerk reaction to the complaints from some residents, and I get that completely. I can understand why the residents would be kicking up a stink, but sorry, there is nothing in any of the council published documents and strategies over the last decade which says giving you on-street parking is a priority goal or strategy of the council. Now, I swear this is the last page of council documentation we're going to look at before we go to the video. Now, back in the council meeting of the 21st of July 2020, council resolved that they wanted to have a traffic, parking and pedestrian study undertaken for Henley Marine Drive and the surrounding local road network that details opportunities to improve pedestrian and traffic safety for those accessing and using Timbrell Park. Now, clearly the Heath Street cycleway would be part of that traffic study, because that would, I guess, have quite a bit of input into this cycle lane and how it's built and all the rest of it. Where's the study? Did council just completely forget that they resolved to do the study and they just never did it? Or they got the study done and it was just never tabled at a council meeting? Where's the study, guys? Because I would say without doing this study, there's really no grounds to pull out the cycleway, is there? So, how can we go to the traffic committee next month to discuss pulling out the cycleway if there's, if this report, which was supposed to have been done a couple of years ago, has never actually been done? So Heath Street runs roughly north to south, as you can see by that pink line. That red box down the bottom is where we lived for a couple of years on the corner of Henley Marine Drive and Heath Street. So I have some reasonable local knowledge of this area. Now we're starting at the top, at the northern end, and we're riding from the First Avenue intersection. We can see here we're coming to the Rickard Street intersection here. And you can see, well, from this side of the road, the sight lines look not too bad. And one thing to note is going downhill, it's on-road shared. And from my experience, you get drivers just hammering down here, wanting to get onto Henley Marine Drive to then zoom around to the Bay Run. It's a big problem. Okay, we're supposed to just go straight across the road here into the park, up this ramp. And the path going to the left there, which looks pretty old, that's supposed to be upgraded as part of the Timbrell Park kind of, general upgradey thing. Which obviously hasn't happened yet. So council hasn't bothered putting a wombat crossing in the middle here, although it's a busy park with lots of kids and sports fields, and there's a playground around the corner, Libby's Place, for kids with disabilities. You would think it would be a good place to put in a crossing that would make it safe for kids, people in wheelchairs, all that stuff to get across. But no, there's just a concrete island in the middle. And in my experience, people go hooning along Henley Marine Drive at up to 100 kilometres an hour at times. It's a shocker. But anyway, going up the hill, I've got it hopefully in real-time speed. So you can see it's a bit of a slow struggle getting up the hill, because this does have quite a slope. If you're young and you're skinny and you're super fit, you can hammer up here fairly fast. But even middle-aged guys puff and pant a bit getting up here. And the reason there's a separated cycleway on this side of the road is if you're not fit, or you're not someone that's been cycling for years, if you're inexperienced or you're with kids that struggle to go up a slope, you're in a protected lane. You're not out on the road with drivers, impatient, angry, arrogant drivers coming up your backside trying to force you along. Okay, we're up to First Avenue. You can see there's a raised intersection pad here. This is kind of very City of Sydney, I would say. You see quite a bit of this around, say, the Redfern area. And you know, it's good to see it here at this intersection. You know, it's not going to tear the sump off a car, but it is enough just to slow down cars coming from all directions. And let's watch this car. Yeah, you can see they don't go absolutely flying across there too much. Gives you a chance to, you know, get across. And like I said, if you're with kids, especially young kids, you really need that. So let's just have another run down the hill, and you can see, look, there's a reasonable amount of on-street parking here on both sides of the roads, but you know, also quite a few gaps here. And you know, in my experience, unless there's sport on down at the field here at the bottom, yeah, there's usually quite a bit of on-street parking along Heath Street. You know, the residents, you know, they don't have that many cars which overflow out of their driveways and garages and stuff and need to be parked on the street. You might not be able to park outside your house, but you know, you can generally get a park in the street unless, you know, like there's a footy grand final on and there's thousands of people here. And you know, when that happens, parking is just, you know, a dead loss for, you know, half a kilometre around Timbrell Park. And you know, what I said in the earlier video is that if you want to solve the parking problem here, you really need to take out one of the footy ovals and put in like a 6-story, you know, concrete car park to you know, cater for the thousands of people that want to come down here. So look, I'm not going to make any you know, judgments on these rather interesting treatments they've done here, but you know, going up here, you know, looking at you know, residents coming in and out of their driveways, you know, that's what they're really complaining about. And you can see back there, there were a couple of people that were parked in their driveways. And let's have a closer look at those people that are in fact doing that. Now in this video, we've got 2 instances of drivers who are parked in their driveways. Here's the first one, and notice they've driven straight in. They haven't reversed in. Now, of course, they're going to have a hell of a time reversing out, aren't they? Because yes, their vision is going to be blocked because they are reversing out of their driveway. That's it. If they reversed into their driveway, and this is something I have drilled into my family for the last 2 decades, that we reverse into the driveway so that when we drive out, your sight lines are so much better. You're at much lower risk of running over a pedestrian or a kid scootering on the footpath or something like that, because we've lived in a number of houses where, because of fences and hedges and stuff like that, we've had absolutely just no sideways visibility coming out of our driveway. And so for that reason, we've always driven out nose first, because you can look left, look right really easily. You can just stick your nose out a little bit to warn people that you know, there's a car coming out. So if there is someone scootering or skateboarding or riding or wheelchairing on the footpath, they've got time to brake. And you know, you only have to get your bonnet out, and then you can look left and right and see what's going on. Whereas if you reverse out, you've got, you know, how do you see left and right? Because you know, you don't have your head. Your head can't spin 360 degrees around, can it? And you've got all the back of the car behind you. So you know, the first thing, if I was counsel, I'd be saying, how about you try reversing into your driveway to start with, and then tell us whether you still have problems driving out. Now, if people like this come along and say, oh, I can't reverse into my driveway, it's like, well, seriously, you know, is that our problem? Should you really hold a license if you can't reverse your car? I mean, that is, when you go for your license, that is a skill you have to demonstrate. So, you know, just reverse your flipping car in. It's just safer and better all round for everybody. And you know, worst case, if your house burns down, it's a hell of a lot easier if you jump in your car to drive straight out. You know, this is something that was also drilled into me, God, over 30 years ago when I was in the reserves and I was a truck driver. We always reversed our vehicles in, our trucks in, you know, into our revetments or our camouflaged encampments and stuff. So, you know, if things hit the fan and we had to get out in a hurry, you could just jump in and just drive straight out. Reversing, it takes longer and it's more dangerous and it's just downright silly. No one should do it anywhere, particularly along here where there's a cycleway. Just stop doing it. And here's our second driver, who is much more sensible, obviously taken my advice. You could see they've reversed in and they're going to be driving out. So, you know, much easier for them. It'll be interesting to discuss the experiences between these 2 residents to say, you know, does this person have as many problems coming out? Now, in terms of visibility being blocked when you get out into the street, does it really make any difference here if you took out the cycleway and you put those vehicles back against the curb? The drivers are still going to have exactly the same visibility issues coming out into the street. You know, the issue is not the cycleway. The issue is the vehicles parked in the street. Now, not that, you know, we were living in Norman Street not that long ago, which is only a couple of 100 meters from here. You know, I used to walk down to the Bay Run Cafe almost every day with the dogs, and the Bay Run Cafe is kind of, you know, just up the hill a little bit further. So, you know, I walked down Rickard Street and I walked up and down Heath Street all the time, observing this kind of stuff. And, you know, we had the same problem. In fact, it was even worse than this, getting our vehicle in and out of our driveway, which is why we reversed in. But we always crept out and had to creep partly out into the street because our neighbours had, you know, SUVs and four-wheel drives, you know, tall vehicles which are hard to see over. You know, in the old days before we had this craze for, you know, tall SUVs and stuff and utes and vans and etc., it was much, much easier to see, you know, the traffic coming up the street through or around vehicles because you could see through them. You can't do that anymore. That's not the fault of the cycleway. You know, that's the fault of people changing their habits in terms of the vehicles they want to drive these days. So, you know, tearing out the cycleway is not going to fix that problem. Removing the on-street parking will fix that problem. And again, if we go back to all the strategies we talked about earlier, where in any strategy document does it say council wants to increase the availability of on-street parking or even maintain the current availability of on-street parking? There's nothing. Instead, you know, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff about there's a climate emergency. Well, here we go. We've got a response here to the climate emergency. And what do you want to do with it? You want to tear it up. I got to say, council, Greta would not be amused.